the idea of the Avatar is fundamentally an undemocratic one. The idea that every, like, generation, or every time the last Avatar dies, you get a completely politically unappointed, unaccountable to any public process, like, demigod. You're essentially just randomly giving one person every generation the Ubermensch title. Hit me up. I love talking about stuff that I believe.
So about the J.K. Rowling situation, I feel that a lot of the times, like, I think, obviously you're a white leftist, and I feel like at times, because like you're a straight cisgender male and stuff, I feel like sometimes, like you explained why you used ironic misogyny to come at J.K. Rowling, and I feel that a lot of leftists don't really understand that, using irony or using, like, I wouldn't necessarily say dark humor, but like semi-edgy ironic humor is a way to get a point across. And at the same time, I feel like they want to destroy a system and everything, but then at the same time get mad over like a simple ironic misogyny that's attempted to make a transphobe look stupid. Like, they don't understand that, yes, we're trying to fight against TERFs, but you can't fight against TERFs trying to use optics, because they're going to attack trans people and they're never going to worry about optics. So I just really don't understand why people are coming at you about that.
Well, I do think that optics are important here. I think that if I had had the opportunity to speak with her in a setting where I knew she would respond, I probably wouldn't employ ironic misogyny as a rhetorical tactic. I do think, though, that the argument that you're giving them ammunition with this kind of cedes the position conservatives want to front, which is that their arguments are based in reality, which they're not. If you say you're giving them ammunition, the implication there is kind of that, like, these arguments they have are the real reasons that they are what they are, you know? And that, you're just adding additional, like, fuel to the fire. But I don't really think that's the case. I don't think they feel that way.
Now, agree or disagree. Now, I do believe that if you were a black man, or if you were let's say you were a trans woman, I think you using ironic misogyny I think you wouldn't have gotten the same backlash if you had used ironic misogyny. I do believe because you're a cisgendered male that you got as much backlash as you did. But at the same time, I feel like the left, them coming at you, I guess, definitely goes into your point that I think the left is too, they have a stranglehold on identity politics, but at the same time, they hate identity politics, especially when you talk about in terms of, like, girl boss feminism, or having black people in positions of power. That won't really change anything. So I really don't understand why sometimes on the left we make it seem like because somebody is of a certain privilege, if they make a good point about a bigoted statement, that's simply because the person who made the bigoted statement is of a quote unquote marginalized community, then that, the person who made the point, everything they say is invalid simply because they made it towards somebody who's of a marginalized community. But I do think that at times optics don't necessarily determine whether or not you're right or wrong. Optics simply are attempted to get a point across, and it's to do it in a way so that people understand it. Whether or not you get backlash or not, I think the left really needs to understand that optics don't mean anything when we're trying to destroy fascism, when we're trying to destroy patriarchy. Like, you can't care about optics. That's the reason why I think the right has a stranglehold on quote unquote culture compared to the left.
Well, I do think that optics matter. I just think the issue is that you shouldn't let the conservatives dictate what is or is not good optics. You can't fall for their propaganda when they pretend to believe in things they don't actually believe in. So, for example, it's long been the position of racists in the United States that they don't actually have an issue with black people. They care about the problems with black culture, so they say. And the idea there is that their criticisms of black culture are a direct product of the so-called irresponsible behaviors that black people engage in, with their hip-hop and their rap and what have you. But to believe them in that is to essentially say, we could have black liberation, but were it not for the mumble rappers or whatever else. It's very silly,
The mumble rappers, oh my god.
Well, the point is that they're lying. They don't actually care about that. That's not the thing that determines their support or lack of support for black issues, you know? So to cede that to them seems to me like you're giving them unnecessary optical ground.
Okay, now this next topic is where, you know, we'll probably reach the Vaush pit at this point. Like, I feel like this is the one where we're going to disagree. So, I just want to know why you had a problem with No Name's tweets.
You're going to have to remind me what exactly they said.
So, No Name said that she stopped performing because she didn't want to, because there were too many white people at her performances. And she also said something about white leftists or something like that. And you had a problem with her saying that, I don't want to perform anymore because there's too many white people in my audiences. I just want to know, like, why you had a problem with that specific tweet.
Well, I think it's racist.
Wait. Why do you think that's... Wait, I just want to know, why do you think that's racist? Even though black people can't be racist? Because you need power plus you need power plus prejudice to be racist.
I don't think so.
But isn't that a liberal stance? That's so liberal.
I'm not a liberal.
You're a leftist, right?
Yeah.
The majority of leftists have the tenet that racism, you need power plus prejudice. Yes or no?
Oh, sure, yeah. But the majority of leftists are morons, so I wouldn't put too much stock in that. I disagree. Really, what we're talking about here...
Can you explain why you're saying that No Name not wanting to perform because there are too many white people in her audiences? Why do you think that's racist? Explain.
Do you think it would be racist for a white performer to say they have too many black fans in their audience, so they're no longer going to perform?
Yes, it would be racist because of the power dynamic.
I don't think it's racist because of the power dynamic. I think it's racist because it's racist. You're exhibiting racial bias. I think that's pretty weird, you know?
But you have to understand that... See, this is why I say sometimes, like, this is not specifically targeted towards you specifically, but I think a lot of white leftists, whenever they talk about racial issues, they don't take the time to, like, add nuance to a lot of their takes. Like, Hassan had a pretty cringe take when the Nicki Minaj anti-vax situation came up. And I feel that with the No Name thing, you have to understand that she is, you know, obviously different than most, I guess you could say, artists, black artists. She is very, very conscious, and she knows what she's talking about. Like, when she makes tweets, people listen. And I think that her saying she doesn't want to perform for white people isn't her being racist. It's her saying she feels, because of the history of racism and white supremacy in this country, that her performing in front of white people, she, in her head, believes that a lot of white people, when they listen to black music, they have a lot of cognitive dissonance.
Yeah, like, I think this is racist. Like, you're basically just being racist and then asking me how it's like racism. Like, well, I have a bias against this racial group, and I think this racial group is different, so I don't want to do this thing for this racial group. Like, yeah, it comes off kind of racist to me. It's not institutionally racist. Like, it's not as though she's reaffirming a broader power structure. It's not like an element of systemic racism against white people, but it's definitely racist, yeah.
But, wait, hold up. So you know what minstrel shows are, right?
Yes.
So her not wanting to perform for white people somewhat goes back to that like a lot of black artists, not just No Name, like most black artists, when they are performing, they're performing for the majority of in their audience. The majority of them are white people.
Well, the majority of people in America are white, right? So it's probably going to be kind of a recurring theme in a lot of cases.
Yeah, but at the same time, yes or no, do you think that the majority of white people, when they're listening to rap, when they listen to rap music, they're like, oh, I can really relate to this? Like, do you really think they can?
Well, I mean, it depends on the rap songs, right? A lot of rap songs are about getting laid. I mean, yeah, sure. If the rap song's about growing up in poverty, then, I mean, yeah, I mean, it depends on the rap song. Rap is like a musical genre, not like a subject of discussion. So, You know, potentially, yeah.
Okay, I'll give a better example. Do you think that majority of, I wouldn't even say like, not even just white, like the average white person, I don't care how woke they are, I don't care how many books on critical race theory they wrote. Like, do you think the majority of white people listen to Pimp a Butterfly and be like, damn, I really can relate to Kendrick Lamar when he says, you know, you never liked this anyway? Like, do you really think that the majority of white people, when they listen to that type of rap music, that they can just listen to it and just be like, they can just jam to it? Like,
I mean, I think they can jam to it. I think they can relate to it too, because humans have empathy and we're capable of understanding shared experiences, even if we haven't directly gone through what... Like, should black people not be able to consume media that is more like white, I guess? Because they may not be able to relate to it? I don't know. I just don't get the point. Like, why can't we all just enjoy whatever media we like, right?
because it shows somewhat of cognitive dissonance. Does it not? Because
to enjoy rap as a white person?
If I'm a white person,
Kanye is like super rich. Have you experienced ultra wealth? Is there cognitive dissonance in you enjoying?
Because me and Kanye West have both experienced systemic racism.
Dude, I promise you, there is more in common between you and me than there is between you and Kanye, guaranteed.
Oh, Vaush, you're doing the white leftist class reductionism.
Wait, hold on. I promise you that being literally one of the most powerful people in the music industry and ultra wealthy makes more of a distinction between you and the proles than you and me both being like of regular, relative to Kanye at least, income and being white and black. Like, yeah, that's definitely a much bigger difference. You telling me you can relate to rappers when they talk about how they're on top of the music industry and they're like fucking on yachts and shit? Like, I can't either. I don't do that. You know?
But that is something that is universal to all, like having, getting laid, that's universal to all human
beings.
Like
being a billionaire, that's universal to all humans?
Okay, not the wealth being the billionaire part, but I'm talking about like, I wouldn't necessarily say like getting money part, but like the getting laid, throwing money. I mean, I've been to the strip club.
Well, yeah, white and black people can both relate to that, but you can't relate to any of the shit rap artists say when they're like, yeah, got my new Bugatti. Like, you don't know what the fuck that feels like, right? So does that mean you shouldn't be able to listen to what they're making?
And I'm looking at your chat. They're saying that I was a HOTEP. I'm literally a Marxist communist. Like, no, I'm not a HOTEP. I'm not a HOTEP.
I saw someone say Kendrick Lamar was a HOTEP. I don't know.
Okay. I actually want to get into that. So Kendrick isn't actually a HOTEP. He got labeled a HOTEP because he put in one of the songs, at the end of one of his songs, he had an audio from a Hebrew Israelite saying how black people are the chosen people of God. That's why people said that he was a HOTEP. Now,
it's pretty weird.
I mean, do I think that Kendrick Lamar is a HOTEP? No. Now, black people who think that we are the true Israelites, that's a whole different discussion. Not because I necessarily think that they're correct. I don't think that black people are like the chosen Jews or whatever. Now, are we the chosen people? That's a different conversation for a different day.
I think that's also not true. I don't know if there are any chosen people. It is kind of weird to sample from a speech from like a Nazi group, right? Like the black Israelites are like Nazis.
Wait, hold on. What do you mean by a Nazi group?
The black Israelites are basically Nazis. Their political prescriptions are very similar. They're just for black people instead of white people.
I've watched hella videos from black Israelites because my peoples, a lot of them believe that black people are the chosen people. But to say that that's another problem I have a little bit with a lot of white leftists. They equate fringe black nationalist groups to Nazis. They're like not even in the same stratosphere.
What do they believe? Black Israelites believe that they're God's chosen people, that Jews are the false usurpers of their legacy, that they should create an ethno-state to their supremacist race, and, like, build, like, a world culture. Like, I mean, I don't know. It's not exactly Nazi shit, but it's, like, pretty similar. It's, like... Like,
I'm sorry. Like, when's the last genocide that black Israelites committed?
Wait,
name it.
Wait, when did Richard Spencer commit a genocide? Can't I just condemn people for their ideology?
Richard Spencer is one person. Like the Nazi Party committed a genocide against 6 million Jews.
Wait,
Black Israelites
that happened like 80 years. Wait, so I need to wait for like 6 million Jews to die before I point out people believe like Nazi ideology? Like, if an
well, because
ideology leads to that, I don't know, right? Like, the Nazi ideology isn't exactly the same as a lot of neo-Nazi sects that have popped up afterwards. Do I have to wait for every one of them to kill their own 6 million Jews before I can go like, oh, wait, that was pretty bad? Like, why can't they just identify the problems in the ideology to begin with?
okay, I can somewhat agree with that, but like when you think about it, Richard Spencer, they led an attack at Charlottesville, correct?
Yeah, he was... I think he was one of the organizers, yeah.
So, can you name me an organized terrorist attack that the Black Hebrew Israelites groups have committed on American soil?
They're actually one of the most overrepresented hate crime groups in the United States, actually. I don't have, like, the numbers directly in front of me, but they, like, black nationalist and separatist groups are actually massively overrepresented for how few of them there are and how many hate crimes and terrorist attacks they do. It's actually kind of crazy. I think they actually, per, like, number of groups, might be more of them, proportional to how many black people there are, than, like, explicit white nationalist groups doing the same. I don't know how that pans out exactly. There's a lot of data fudging, but there's, like, a lot of it, yeah.
Okay. I don't...
I need to look more into it. This is data that I remember from about 2 years ago, but... But yeah, this stuff does happen. Okay, Here's one link that somebody provided. Deadly attack in New Jersey, possible link to black separatist
Oh, yeah,
movement.
no, I heard about that. I heard about that one.
Let me see. SPLC lists 144 black Hebrew Israelite as black separatist hate groups because of their anti-white and anti-Semitic beliefs. Many Hebrew Israelites are neither explicitly anti-white nor anti-Semitic. It's a rising extremist sector. It's
hold up. You see that part? You see that part? It says, and do not advocate violence.
Oh,
Nazis advocate for the genocide of people.
Richard Spencer didn't.
Not advocating for the genocide of people.
Richard Spencer didn't.
Yes, he indirectly has.
Oh, indirect. Oh, wait, no, he didn't. He said that he never wanted violence. He went on CNN and said that.
But that doesn't necessarily mean he doesn't want violence. If that was the case, then Charlottesville would have never happened. He never would have organized Charlottesville.
Well, the black separatists are also doing hate crimes and terrorist attacks, so, I mean, maybe they're a little more violent than they're letting on. I don't know. Like, there are plenty of Nazis online who say they're not violent.
Vaush, when you look at the hate crimes of white nationalist groups and look at the hate crimes of quote-unquote black nationalist groups, can you really compare that? Like, come on. Like,
is it like a competition? Like, wait, how many Jews have to die to a given group before I can condemn them? Like, I don't know. It's just, if they're bad, they're bad.
Why does it have to always go back to the Jews? Like, why does it always?
Because both groups are anti-Semitic. I'm just using that as like a common point. But like, I don't know. Like, how many bad things do they have to do before? Like, it's not a competition, right? Like, I don't know.
No, I'm not saying it's a competition, but like, I think a lot of the times, you know, I have a lot of black friends who, you know, most of them are communists and like they're anti-capitalist, but they don't necessarily agree with how sometimes white leftists will criticize these fringe black nationalist groups, and they'll automatically label them, oh, you're anti-Semitic, or you're homophobic, or you're transphobic, yada yada, well, which is true. But they don't give historical context as to why there is a bigoted sentiment a lot in the black community. Like, they'll just say, oh, the black community is, like, you know, it's homophobic and transphobic, blah 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 blah.
Does it?
But they won't talk about how
anything?
Colonial. You said what?
Wait, do we do that for the white national? Like, what are you getting at? Like, the context doesn't make it okay. Like, it's good to understand why, but
I'm not saying that it is okay, but there's no nuance that is applied whenever black nationalist groups are labeled this.
What nuance? What nuance do we want to add to it? Like, if they want
whenever
dead.
a black nationalist group, like if a black nationalist group were to commit a hate crime, let's say they were to do it against a gay person, the media would immediately make it seem like the overarching black community is homophobic. Whereas with the white community, if white nationalist groups do that, there isn't like this sentiment in mass media like, oh, the white community has a issue of homophobia and transphobia. They'll be like, well, it's the conservatives, it's the evangelicals.
So I agree that we have a problem with the crimes of individual members of a minority group being extrapolated to the entire group, but as leftists, we don't do that, and so we're not doing that. So, like, what context isn't being applied here? You asked for, like, context to understand, but not applying this to a broader group isn't adding context. It's just not being bigoted, you know? So, like, why should I care if a black Hebrew Israelite is, like, why would I care why they're homophobic? What difference does that make to my...
Because the context, well, from a leftist perspective, you would have to say, instead of saying, oh, the black community has an issue of homophobia, transphobia, misogyny, instead it should be, the black community has an issue of homophobia, transphobia, and misogyny because of colonialism, slavery, and the indoctrination of the Catholic Church within the black community. That is a better answer than just saying a blanket statement.
Well, I don't care. The white community has reasons for their supremacist values as well. A lot of white people in the United States were racist because of powerful business owners who convinced them that they could protect their jobs by preventing immigrants and former slaves from taking their place in the factories. Like, that racism was often supported through legitimate economic terror from, like, very poor white people. But I'm not now, 150 years later, going to go like, oh, well, we need to mention this every time we condemn racism from whites. Like you can, like, it's good to know, but I don't think it's necessary to preamble every condemnation with that.
Oh, and the Professor Flowers. I watched about 2 hours of that interview. So
speaking of people who want white people, I'm kidding.
What issues? No. What issues did you have with what she said? Well, I just want to hear I want to hear it from you.
Mostly the fact that she was racist, a bad advocate for indigenous rights, and also she seemed to be okay with ethnic cleansing against white people. Seemed pretty bad.
Okay, obviously I'm not for ethnic cleansing of white people.
No, that's what she said, though. You know, you got to be. People are sneaky with that. You got to tease those answers out of them sometimes. You
know. Okay, now here, just listen. I am not for ethnic cleansing of white people. Obviously, no. Mm-hmm. But to say, I think your point of view saying that black people want to do that, or that most black people don't have the capacity. Yes. Because you made it seem like she was you said she was advocating for ethnic cleansing. But the majority of black people do not want to do that. Like,
well, wait. Yeah, she was. Wait, I think she is. Yeah. Not like, I don't think black people want to do that.
But like, when you, and another thing, you were, I think you were against safe spaces. I think you were saying that, like, black only spaces, you said you were against that?
It depends on the context. I don't think they're inherently a bad thing, but oftentimes I feel like the attitudes which lead to their advocacy can be kind of damaging. But what does that have to do with Professor Flowers' thing?
Okay, I was gonna ask that because, like, you were saying that colonized people not wanting to live with their colonizer was a bad thing. I'm going to explain why you think that's a bad thing.
Well, by not live with, we were talking about nation states. So we were talking about deporting racial groups. So in that context, like if a black person doesn't want to share a house with a white person, like, I still think that's kind of fucking weird, but it's your right. But if they don't want to share a country, well, I think that's pretty, like, harmful,
Okay, you're saying that it's harmful. Do you think that black people can achieve economic and social liberation in America? Yes or no? Do you believe that?
Right now, in this moment? Like
yes.
Any individual black person right now?
No, I'm talking about the majority. I'm talking about the majority of black people.
Well, there's still work to do, of course. In concept, yeah, I do believe that.
You actually believe that?
Yeah, absolutely, I do.
Oh my gosh, Vaush, lib. Oh my gosh, you're on lib shit right now. Do you actually legitimately believe that the country that has subjected black people to 400 years of oppression and hell, do you really think that our freedom is going to happen in this country? Do you actually believe that?
Yeah, of course. How could I not?
Explain. Please explain. Please explain. Like, this is the type of take I would expect from a lib.
There are plenty of minority groups that used to be heavily ostracized that no longer are. Not really, at least.
Because they can assimilate into white status. Black people can't.
No, not even on issues like that. The Romans, for example, used to think that all people...
The Romans! Oh my gosh.
Wait, on how long of a time scale are we talking? Yeah, the Romans used to believe that there was an intrinsic fundamental difference between people who were citizens and people who were barbarians, or part of conquered provinces. But Rome fell, peoples changed, new ideas arose, and eventually attitudes that they had differed. In Europe, which group of people, which ethnicity, do you think the Britons hated the most for hundreds and hundreds of years? It was not Africa. Huh?
It was the Irish.
For a good time. I was thinking the Franks, but I mean, honestly, they hated a lot of groups, you know. Now, the British and the Irish, to this point, I think, you know, still a bit of a contentious relationship, but for the longest time, it was the Franks. And let me tell you, okay, the hatred the English and, like, French had for each other, it was pretty rough and essentialist too. Like they thought the other was like subhuman, cursed by God. Like it was a whole goddamn thing. But now, like, it doesn't really matter. There's just kind of like a lingering national rivalry that's like half of a meme anyway. Yeah, I think that bigotry fades. It takes a long time and it's a painful process, but I legitimately believe in the idea that we can build better societies. We don't need to separate people for us to get along. I think that's a very defeatist attitude.
Okay, we can agree to disagree on that one. Oh, and another thing, I actually just finished Avatar: The Last Airbender, and
that show agrees with my message because they all end up getting along.
Okay, listen. I think the show is amazing. I think, you know, any baby leftist should go watch that because I think it's good, somewhat good for radicalization in a way. But I watched your video dissecting the show and saying, you know, if it came on now, conservatives will hate it, and I agree with you on that. But when you said Tankies hate the Jet episode, I kind of cringed because what did you mean by that? What did you mean by that?
Well, in it, Jet was essentially saying that you could justify like any violence against your oppressors, even if it meant targeting civilians, because it's in the service of some kind of like broader opposition. So, for example, Jet was making a Professor Flowers argument. Jet was saying that the crimes committed by the Fire Nation were so severe that his occupiers deserve to die.
I just want to acknowledge to chat, I am not a tanky. Please stop. I am not a tanky. But go on.
Yeah. Jet believed that the crimes of his occupiers were so heinous that actions against even the civilian population were justified, you know, that the antagonism was justified. So Jet was willing to kill a bunch of people by flooding a town with a dam, right? Professor Flowers is saying essentially the same thing for colonizers, right? Like, the crimes of colonizers are so bad that you could morally justify allowing the indigenous people of a country, which in that case Jet was, to engage in ethnic cleansing in order to purify the population and rid them free again as a kind of retributive act. Because Jet didn't want to be forced to live alongside his colonizers, huh? So that was the point that I was making. I feel like the logic of that episode was a rejection of that essentialist attitude.
Okay, I somewhat agree with that. I think that Jet's anger was somewhat justified. And there was a similar situation later near the end of the show where Katara and Zuko went to go find his mother's killer. And her not killing her mother's killer, I think in a way somewhat pacifies radical ideologies. Like, I feel like that scene was a little, I didn't like it, not because, like, you know, forgiveness is cool and all, but I do think that, like, somewhat in a way it pacifies, you know, our message. Our message at the end of the day is a revolution against the capitalist class who continues to oppress the proletariat. And I feel that that specific scene somewhat pacifies, you know, a lot of the rage and anger she had towards the Fire Nation. Well, and I somewhat believe that happened at the end where Aang, instead of, you know, killing the Fire Lord, he just takes his bending, which in a way sort of coincides with the real world. Like, you know, distributing wealth to everybody won't take away, you know, social bigotry. So I just wanted to hear your take on that.
Well, I mean, past a point, it's a kid's show, right? I mean, these seem more like...
no, it's not. It's definitely not a kid's show.
Well, you know what I mean. It's a show airing on Nickelodeon, at the very least. I think I think, like, I mean, those are more character beats than anything, right? The reason Aang didn't want to kill the Fire Lord was personal. He's a pacifist. I mean, everyone else was doing it, right? Like, everyone else was encouraging him to kill, the Fire Lord. Aang had to find another solution. That's not to say there's not a hint of, like, you know, liberalism in the idea that it's morally superior to capture rather than kill, like a genocidal maniac like Ozai. But I don't know, it seemed like a character beat. And I feel like in the case of, like, Katara, that was also more of a don't denigrate yourself by, like, murdering this person who can't defend themselves type of deal. But I don't know. I think you can read into those, like, interpretations that aren't, like, explicitly denunciations of violent activism, but, you know.
And then I think, you know, when we examine the show Legend of Korra was, in my opinion, it was a 7 out of 10. It was still an amazing show, don't get me wrong. But I do think that each of the villains were in it. Well, I wouldn't say necessarily Kuvira, but Amon, season 2's villain, and Zahir. I feel like the villains, in a way, showed that the creators did not know anything about politics at all. Like, the first season was basically a bastardization of communism. Like, basically, they made it seem like, oh, benders are bad because they oppress people. But the creators, in a way, they didn't show any benders getting, quote unquote, oppressed by benders, which, in a way, the creators were trying to say all the inequality and the oppression that you woke people say exists, it doesn't actually exist. I feel like that was the reason why they made Amon the way they did, even though he somewhat had points. Because I was talking to my friend and he said that, in a way, if Aang were still alive at that time, he would possibly understand why non-benders hated benders, because him personally seeing his entire race get destroyed by bending, by the Fire Nation. So I feel like, in a way, Amon somewhat had of a point. Now, I don't agree with everything that he said. And the way they made him to turn out to be a bender is an allegory to, in real life, they'll say, oh, all you communists, y'all just want to be rich yourselves. That's where I feel like that's where they went with that specifically.
Oh, my takes on Korra are long-winded and well-documented. You're not going to get me on that one. That is a whole goddamn convo. I think there are plenty of political problems with The Legend of Korra.
I mean, the villains are honestly the only problems. Everything else is pretty spot on, if you ask me.
Well, like, I definitely still enjoyed watching it.
I mean, other than the villains, what other critiques could you possibly have? Because the villains are the reason why the show is bad. Like, I mean, I'm not going to say bad. It's the villains, the way they were made. Basically, the creator said, we're going to make the villains as, you know, as nutty as possible. So then at the end, they'll say neoliberal capitalism is the only solution. That's basically what the villains were supposed to do.
Yeah, I don't disagree that a recurring element of a lot of these stories is an unwillingness to challenge bad political ideologies beyond... like, liberal democracy would be preferable.
Why don't you believe that? Because
wait, hold on. We've been off so many topics. Wait, hold. Are we on Legend of Korra now? I can't. You're getting my sleep deprived brain to leap over a whole lot of content here. My goodness, I gotta remember the whole of the Korra show. You gotta help me. Be kind. Be kind to me.
Somebody in your chat said that Korra was a lib show. In my opinion, agree or disagree, I do think that Korra was a liberal. She was so unbearably liberal. Like, at the beginning, for the first scene, the dude was at the town park talking about how benders are oppressing them, and then she said, "You're oppressing yourselves." Like, I thought she just finished listening to Ben Shapiro if she's saying shit like that.
Look,
like, no,
I don't disagree. The problem ultimately is that both The Legend of Korra and The Last Airbender posed as fairly apolitical shows, you know? Like, in both cases, they advocate for what is kind of framed as a common sense political ideology, you know? Even in The Last Airbender, which is a really good show, but in The Last Airbender, they were fighting against totalitarian theocratic fascism, you know? With Fire Lord Ozai, or I guess, I don't know,
Everybody can get behind that interview, though. Everybody can get behind that.
Right, well, you know, if a liberal's point is, hey, let's fight against totalitarian theocratic fascism genocide, then, like, okay, great point, liberal, you know? But the issue is that in The Legend of Korra, the villains are all caricatures of different ideologies. Like, you know, Kuvira's a fascist, of course. Zahir is an anarchist.
I'm sorry, Zahir had a... I'm sorry.
Zahir had a point.
Would I be considered Zahir was right?
Zahir had a point. He had, like, he was the protagonist of that season. Anyway, yeah, no, I agree. The issue is that liberal critique is pretty strong when it's against the thing liberalism replaced. Liberalism replaced, you know, theocratic monarchies. That was the thing it replaced. That's what came before liberal democracies in most cases. But anarchism, that's supposed to come after. That's the follow-up. So it seems like the natural critiques there get a lot weaker, and you need to be more explicit with the way in which you challenge these positions. But you can't do that without being forthcoming about them. And, oh my goodness. You can't do that without being forthcoming about them. And if you can't be forthcoming about them, which they can't because, again, it airs on Nickelodeon. It's not like they're going to go into diatribes about the necessity of liberalism or whatever. There are limitations.
Okay, so...
Wait, hold on one second. Hold on. There's light peering through my window. 1 second.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right.
Wait, so do you actually... Because I see a lot of times on your channel, you make fun of anarchists. A lot of the time.
I make fun of people who make bad anarchist arguments. I think. I'm sympathetic to the political... Do you think
that Zahir made a good anarchist argument? Because you remember in the forest where they were, when he was in the spirit world talking to Korra, he made Korra look like a dumbass.
Yeah, Zahir was pretty explicitly the protagonist that entire time. Yeah, I think so, at least. Because in a way, it reminds me of some of the arguments that I've made before about superheroes. The idea of the Avatar is fundamentally an undemocratic one. The idea that every, like, generation, or every time the last Avatar dies, you get a completely politically unappointed, unaccountable to any public process, like, demigod, capable single-handedly of altering, like, worldwide conflicts with the power they personally control. To an anarchist, this is monstrous. I mean, you're essentially just randomly giving one person every generation the Ubermensch title and just hoping they turn out to be good. Especially now that Korra has severed her links to all the past avatars, there's not even like a spiritual advice-seeking component that might temper their bad tendencies. Imagine if Korra had sided with Kuvira. Imagine if Korra had been born and indoctrinated into Kuvira's government. Imagine if she had gone to fucking Kuvira Jugend camps when they were growing up. Like, there's a spiritual element to being the Avatar, but...
They would have had to stop the Avatar if she were to be indoctrinated like that.
I'm sorry?
If she was the Avatar and grew up like Kuvira and was indoctrinated with that type of shit, then they would have had to stop her, because then she would end up becoming a fascist.
Well, right. Well, I mean, good luck stopping her. She's a demigod, right? That's the point. Nobody was able to stop Korra the entire time she was running her show. Aang took down the Fire Lord during Sozin's Comet. Like, with that fucking Avatar state shit, they can, like, wipe cities off the map. So Zahir, had a point. The idea of someone like that. Zahir's whole thing was like, hey, I'm sorry, Korra, you're not a bad person inherently, but for the betterment of the world, people like you have to go. So, like, seriously, what, like, chat, did he do anything that was explicitly monstrous, you know? Oftentimes, in shows like this, the character will do, like, a very bad thing, you know, to sort of round it out. Like, here's why you hate them. Like, Zahir would have had this moment where he, like, randomly kills a baby or something. But he assassinated the queen. Okay, I'm fine with that. But like, yeah, I don't know.
Well, oh no, your chat's saying he killed the queen. That's not monstrous. Like as leftists, we're not supposed to look at world leaders who oppress people, see them get killed, and be like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so upset." Like we should be happy because that person is no longer in power.
Didn't he
Like I
kidnap
don't
the
understand
Airbender children? Wait, he kidnapped the Airbender children, but didn't he do that to bait out Korra? That was
Yeah,
that was a
I don't.
bait,
Yeah,
right?
I think him kidnapping the Airbender children, that was bad. That was actually bad.
Yeah, he still kidnapped them. Okay, yeah, it's still bad to kidnap children. However, if you're kidnapping children in service of your attempt to assassinate someone as powerful as Korra, we're getting closer to, like, you know, dicey but politically justifiable territory, you know? This is up there with, like, condemning a revolution because it led to, like, you know, people getting hurt. Like, it's like, well, yeah, but, you know. Killing the queen created a power vacuum that allowed Kuvira's rise. I wonder if that still would have been a problem if, like, Zahir hadn't been stopped. He probably had plans to, like, rehabilitate the Earth Kingdom afterwards, you know? I don't know.
Wait, Vaush, I was actually, my last question was going to be, since you brought up, you know, superheroes and all, I haven't seen the Batman movie, but I was going to say that, you know, do you think if the Avengers were real, that as leftists we should support them? We should support them? Or no? Should we be against them?
That is a very broad question. I don't know how you could even support or be against them, given that they're like a team of unelected superhumans, but I mean, if the Avengers are doing what they do in the story, which is fighting, like, demigods and alien invasions, then I guess you can support them doing that. Like, have fun against Thanos, I guess. But I think we all know that if in real life, like, the Avengers existed, they would all be on the payroll of the U.S. State Department, and they would be used to, like, crack down on protests, okay? So, I don't know. It seems like the system at work here is,
Wait, no, hold on. Yes, I'm glad somebody mentioned The Boys. Because I haven't watched it, but I heard it's very, very good. That I think when we look at the Avengers specifically, I think that, you know, Captain America, as oxymoronic as his superhero name is, I don't think that he would have been on the U.S. State Department payroll. I don't think so. I think obviously, you know, Tony Stark would, because, you know, all the Elon Musk stands, you know, get horny over him. But like at the same time, I don't really think that Captain America, because in the movie, obviously in
I've
the
seen Civil War, yeah, I know. But the thing is, I'm saying that in real life, I don't think the people who have this power would be this, like, idyllic and morally upstanding, right? Because that's always the myth of superhero stories. All the people that get these superpowers are, like, really noble and good. I don't know why they would be. In real life, all the people who have power are, like, monsters. Like, in real life, over and over, whether they be monarchs or businessmen or whatever else, like, they're almost always bad people who are corrupted by the power they have. So I don't know why I would ever think that somebody who can tank bullets without dying would ever be, like, more morally upstanding than the average person, you know?
Mm-hmm. And the last question, which chat will go crazy over.
Wait, you said the last one was... All right, hit me up.
No. Listen. This is my last one. The Russia-Ukraine situation. Now, I swear on everything I'm not a tinky. I promise you I'm not.
Mm-hmm.
But why do you say that people who condemn Russia, people who condemn NATO, and people who condemn neo-Nazis in the Ukrainian government, why do you say that's all lives mattering diplomacy? Like, why do you say that?
Well, ain't it?
But why is that a bad take? Because that's legitimately a good take to have. What is wrong with that take?
I don't know. It just seems kind of... Because it's the all lives matter take. Ukraine isn't doing anything wrong at the moment. Like, they're a nation state. It's not like they're, you know, they don't have no...
So, hold on. Ukraine doesn't have neo-Nazis in their government.
They're not, in this situation, in the context of the invasion, they're not doing anything wrong. Like, I don't think that a country being invaded is an appropriate time to start, like, equivocating, like, and denouncing bad elements. Like, for instance, imagine if every single time anyone brought up how Israel is fucking Gaza and Palestine over, people brought up that Hamas is anti-Semitic. Oh, wait, they do. They're liberals and we hate them for it. Like, you know? This shit happens all the time. By the way, There are more members of Hamas by far than there are members of the Azov battalion. So in terms of proportional representation, Palestine has more bigots with fewer people from which to draw them than Ukraine seems to have.
Yeah, but I don't think you can. I don't think you can compare those two situations, considering Palestine has been in, an issue in the Middle East since 1948, whereas the issues in Ukraine haven't been prevalent since it started in the 1980s.
No, it started in 1939, when the Soviet Union and Hitler both divvied up the territories between them. That's what began the Nazi occupation of what would later be called Ukraine, and then subsequently the Soviet occupation. Ukraine, as we know it today, only really came about in 1989, admittedly, but the people in Ukraine.
Yeah, I said the 80s. I said 1989. I said
but the people in the area that is now Ukraine have been dealing with the consequences of Russian aggression and imperialism for about as long as people in Palestine have been dealing with what Israel's done to them. Now, obviously, the situations aren't perfectly comparable. Like, obviously, what Israel is doing... Well, no, they're not perfectly comparable, but they're very comparable. In both cases, the populations of both Palestine and Ukraine have a long-standing multi-generational reason to be distrustful and hateful towards Russian occupation. Russia has never stopped trying to fuck with Ukraine, not since independence was declared. At the very least, not since a couple of years after independence was declared. I think that Yeltsin was like a little more even-handed with them, but since Putin, at the very least, the nationalist rhetoric and the imperialist rhetoric has been ramping up significantly. So in both these cases, and by the way, the funny thing is, why are Hamas so prominent in Palestine? Well, a lot of Palestinians are legit anti-Semitic because, well, they're bigoted against the group of people who are oppressing them. It sucks, but it's going to happen. Why are there Nazis in Ukraine?
Wait, hold on. Are they bigoted against the people oppressing them, or
yes.
Are they fed up with them being oppressed? There's a huge difference.
Both.
Come on, there's a huge difference.
Wait, both. The Hamas are literally anti-Semitic. They explicitly think that Jews are subhuman.
That's bad, obviously.
Yeah,
but I'm talking about regular Palestinian civilians.
Well, I'm talking about regular Ukrainians. There are anti-Semites in Palestine because they years and years of oppression have given them an essentialist hatred of the group of people who oppresses them. And there are Nazis in Ukraine because historically, Nazis were the ones who politically fermented the greatest degree of opposition to Soviet occupation. They were the ones who were celebrated, as the antagonists to Russian occupation. So for that reason, in both cases, the worst elements of Palestine and Ukraine have been brought about as a consequence of oppression from another group. I think in that sense, they're pretty comparable,
I mean, I somewhat agree with that take, but I really don't get, how, especially in the online left sphere, if you say that, NATO aggression is wrong, when Russian imperialism is wrong, you get labeled, a bad person. Even though Russia...
What imperialism does NATO agree with? Does NATO do? In the context of the Ukraine situation, what is NATO doing?
Specifically, if Ukraine joins NATO, then it would give the United States green light to not declare war on Russia, but it would justify their agitation towards Russia.
How?
What do you mean how? Because if Ukraine joins NATO, Russia is trying to invade Ukraine. The United States would be like, oh, you're trying to invade a NATO member, so we have to step in and intervene.
Yeah, well, first of all, they're not going to join NATO while the invasion's ongoing, but that seems kind of like a Russia problem to me. How is that NATO imperialism? That's on them. NATO's a defensive alliance. I don't see how that's NATO's fault.
Because if NATO joins, it can justify the United States being aggressive towards Russia.
Well, that's
and
a defensive.
Had a Cold War for the past 100 years.
Well, that's a defensive pact. Yeah, that's the point. But Russia wouldn't engage in violence against a NATO country because they know it would end the world. So the point is, the defensive pact disincentivizes Russia from engaging that behavior.
But the reason, but Russia specifically invaded Ukraine because Ukraine wanted to join NATO.
No, they didn't. Russia's been trying to reclaim Ukraine long before Ukraine signed up for NATO membership and got denied, by the way. Ukraine was denied. And by the way, you don't get to invade countries because you don't want them to join a defensive pact to disincentivize you from invading. Like, what kind of logic is that? Like, we get to attack you because you're taking steps to prevent us from attacking you? Like, that's kind of weird. Russia has nothing to fear from NATO. They're a nuclear power. No invasion of Russia will take place.
You don't think it's possible?
No, absolutely not. 0% chance. If any invasion of Russia ever takes place, it would be a response of Russia invading a NATO country. And in that case, it would be deserved. If Russia invades a NATO country, if they trigger, like, the threat of nuclear war, as far as I'm concerned, anything and everything to stop the Russian government is on the table at that point, with literally nothing off the table. Because at that point, they're threatening to end the world, right? I mean, you can't... That's on them. If they're threatening global nuclear war...
No, that's another thing. I'm tired of the media making it seem like, okay, yes, Putin is a monster. That's unequivocally true. He's a monster. But do you think he would use nuclear weapons? No, I'm sorry.
I mean,
he would.
He keeps threatening to, but like, I don't. Maybe he won't.
If Adolf Hitler didn't use nuclear weapons, what makes you think Putin would?
He didn't have nuclear weapons. Adolf Hitler didn't.
Yeah, obviously at the time he didn't have nuclear weapons, but the Nazi army was more advanced at the time compared to other armies across the world.
No, they weren't. Not compared to ours. They didn't have nukes. If they had nukes, I guarantee you they would have used them. 100% they would have used them.
I think Hitler, if he did have nuclear weapons, I do think he would have used them. But to this moral superiority that a lot of people are having, saying, oh, Putin's crazy, he might use nuclear weapons. But the United States is the only country in human history to use one. The only one.
Right.
The only one.
Wait, I don't understand what point you're trying to make, though. Like, what about NATO?
Because
the only point I'm making is that I think that Ukraine has a right to seek out defensive pacts to prevent them from being invaded by Russia, and they're currently being invaded by Russia.
But Russia is specifically invading because they feared that Ukraine was going to join NATO.
Why? So they're invading because Putin literally gave a blood and soil justification for his invasion. He said he wanted to restore the Russian Empire. The old one, before even the Red Army, before the Bolsheviks. So I guess my question is, like, if that's the case, why are there justifications all over the place, and why do they keep faking false flags, And also, why? Who cares if they join NATO? Like, the only reason Russia would fear them joining NATO is if
because
Russia...
they don't want to go to war with the United States.
They're not... Well, wait. They would be declaring that war. You're saying, like, the war with the United States as though the U.S. would be starting that. The example you've provided is one in which they declare war on a NATO member. That's them doing it. Like, they already share a border with NATO countries right now. Latvia, Estonia, Lithuania. Finland might join NATO after all of this. Like, they already share borders with NATO countries. Like if they declare war on them, that's on them. Like, that's their fault.
Wait, but the reason why I'm so confused about this Russia-Ukraine situation in regard to the left, it's like there's so many there's takes, saying, Putin is justified, where I don't necessarily agree with that. But then there's also this notion that Western intervention and NATO intervention is somehow going to make the conflict better. In fact,
I don't agree with that.
Worse. Because Zelensky has been asking Biden for aid, and Biden has said no.
Yeah.
But if he continues to deny Zelensky aid, Russia's going to continue to crush Ukraine. And if they eventually take over Ukraine, you're going to have, I'm not going to say you're going to have the Soviet Union all over again, but if Putin's like, oh, if I can invade Ukraine, why can't I invade these countries to the left of Ukraine? Why can't I continue to expand?
Well, wait, I agree with all this. Yeah, I think that Russia's doing bad shit. But America can't get directly involved. That would be an authorization, essentially, for nuclear conflict, which would be bad, I think.
Okay, so...
Where do I go?
That's the thing. Like, I don't understand how Biden is continuing to reject aid to Zelensky, and Ukraine's continuing to get crushed. But then,
I don't know if he's getting crushed. He's doing pretty good, isn't he?
He's doing better than expected, but they're still going to get crushed. Like, Russia's like the third best military on the planet.
I think
would
we're
put China
quickly.
above.
I think we're indicating right now that that's not really the case. I think Russia had the like second largest military on the planet, but a lot of that was just like outdated Soviet equipment sitting in depots and they haven't had their tires checked in like 20 years. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. In terms of just volume, I feel like they had a pretty good thing going, but clearly that's not enough. You know, you need proper training, logistical support, you need well-equipped and maintained stuff. Apparently, Russian MREs are not only, like, in short supply, they're also really low quality, and Ukraine's MREs are really, really good in comparison. So, like, there are Russian soldiers fighting in Ukraine right now that are living off stale bread, whereas, like, Ukrainians are getting clean supply lines from Kiev and getting a lot of food, and it's like, I don't know. You know, Ukraine might lose, but I thought there was a 100% chance of them losing. Now it's like...
Let's say Russia completely overtakes Ukraine and they occupy the country. You still don't think Biden would have to intervene?
No. He can't intervene. It would trigger nuclear war. Or at least it would, you know...
But if Putin, if the media is as crazy as they make Putin out to be, if he overtakes Ukraine, what's stopping him from going to other countries? Because
NATO.
Yes or no? Is this not the same thing that happened Is this not the same thing that happened with Hitler? He invaded Poland and then he tried to invade other countries. Yes or no?
Yeah. Well, that's why we have NATO. That's why I'm an anarcho-NATOist.
But if the media is as crazy as they're making Putin out to be, you don't think he eventually is going to be like, I want to continue to expand? Do you really not think that?
Then the world will end. Be ready.
It won't end.
Then it will. Then it will. If he declares war on a NATO country and is fully prepared to deal with the consequence of that, if he brings that about to its conclusion, then the world will end. But that's on Putin. I agree. We should murk Putin. I completely agree. He should commit suicide with 2 shots to the back of the head. I completely agree.
You think we should murk Putin?
Absolutely, 100%.
If you murder Vladimir Putin, you're asking for the world to end. Yes or no?
Oh no, I don't think so. I think you could establish.
Whoa! Come on, Vaush. Vaush, you're smarter than that. Come on.
Wait, hold on. So when I say murking, I mean you work with the shadow cabinet of oligarchs in the Russian government who agree to take power after Putin's death with American support behind the scenes, as long as they back off NATO countries and Ukraine. We've done this before. We're probably pretty good at it. Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like if we take Putin out, then that would be asking for nuclear war. Come on. Or it wouldn't necessarily trigger nuclear war, but Russia would definitely, declare war on us for sure.
But I don't think so. It depends on how it's done. I mean, I'm not keep in mind we're talking about what would probably be literally the most complicated and high stakes covert operation conducted possibly ever in all of human history. So, I'm not going to spend 14 hours detailing all the specifics I think would need to take place. I'm not an intel agency, but yeah, I think that in concept, assassinating Putin would probably be a pretty good idea. He seems to keep threatening nuclear war. I think nuclear war is really, really bad. I think there are probably a lot of people in Putin's government who are resentful of him, feeling like he's leading the country down a really bad road. I feel like a lot of the people there probably care more about their money than they do about national glory for Russia, as Putin seems to, or at least his own glory. So I think that it's possible to arrange a situation in which you have, obviously the public story wouldn't be that the CIA killed him. It would be a suicide to the back of the head. You know how it goes. And you could work with that and probably build something better.
Bosh, do you know how many leftists would be like, oh, the CIA did it. We need to be against what the United States did.
Who cares? I argue with the left. Whatever. I'll listen, okay? I'll become an anarcho-NATOist CIA-ist if they pull that one off. If we can avert nuclear war by killing a lunatic like Putin, fuck yeah, that is the best thing. That would unironically be the greatest thing the CIA has ever done. Unironically.
No,
that would. What has the CIA done that's better than killing off a power-hungry, mad dictator who's threatening nuclear war with the world? That's gotta be, right up there, the coolest thing they've ever done, right?
I mean, it would be cool, but
The best. Morally the
You
best
tell-
thing, but also cool.
Are you telling me? You're telling me that killing the leader of the third most powerful country on the planet would not literally rally the country and them not use that to justify going to war with us?
Well, we wouldn't kill him. He would kill himself with 2 shots to the back of the head. We've done this before. We've done coups before. We know how it's done. I wouldn't tell the CIA how to do their job. I'm sure they know what they're doing.
Do you know how many leftists would eventually become pro-Russia if Putin was killed by the CIA?
They're already all pro-Russia. Fuck them. Also, half the reason they're all pro-Russia is because they eat up Russian propaganda for breakfast, okay? Kill Putin, maybe turn them away from their imperialism, and maybe they won't have as many RT articles to fucking chug down to get all their foreign policy pointers from. They're already all pro-Russia. Like, they're all pro-Russia. They all think being anti-America is the same as being pro-socialism or whatever, you know?
Well, being anti-American is pretty base, though.
America's more socialist than Russia is. I know that's a low bar, but it's true.
Oh my gosh, no, Vaush.
By what metric is Russia closer to socialism than America? The country got divvied up by oligarchs. They're not a democracy, and everything worthwhile in their country is controlled undemocratically by billionaires. Like, at least here in America...
Doesn't it, Vaush? Does that not sound familiar?
No! In America, we have a split government with separation of powers, and there are tons of powerful institutions that are elected into, and even institutions like our media are controlled not by the single state hegemon, but by a wide and diverse range of interests. It is so much worse in Russia.
Hold on. You're going to sit here and tell me that America is not an oligarchy? Are you really going to sit here and tell me that?
Of course it is, but not as much of one. Not even close. I think that, like, it's like how what's an example? Like, America is as much of an oligarchy next to Russia as Russia is as much of a democracy next to us. Technically, they have elections, you know. Maybe I should say Assad's democracy, you know? Like, he wins with 99.7% of the vote.
No, Assad, we can all agree Assad apologists are terrible.
Well, they have a democracy, right? They have elections, and you know, all I'm saying is, I'm not saying America's good. It's not. I'm just saying that, you know, some countries are way worse, and Russia definitely is.
You said, okay, Russia's way worse. Okay, so one of the things that I've seen a lot of dumb libs say is that, oh, they're arresting people in Russia for protesting against the war. As if we don't arrest thousands of people every year after police shootings when we protest in the streets.
Also not comparable.
How is that not comparable? How?
I feel like you're doing a disservice to the brave people in Russia for saying that.
How is that not comparable?
So usually what happens when people get arrested in American protests is that it's either the police will sweep up people who are doing like the more objectionable stuff, like, you know, vandalizing or looting or whatever, or it usually happens when police lines close in on protesters and they get like a couple dozen usually. You can take a look at the arrest statistics for all of BLM. There were millions of people who marched in BLM. Not to say the police didn't do a lot of arrests, they definitely did, but it's not like they were sweeping up whole...
They arrested thousands of people.
Right, out of tens of millions of protesters. Now, what's happening in Russia is they are arresting everyone for protesting just for protesting, and they're expediting the process of charging them. They're also considering life in prison for misinformation about the war, which means disagreeing with the state line. They are far more anti-protester than America is, and I just feel like equating the two, like, because America has its problems, which it does, which should be fought against, that means we should like implicitly downplay how bad things are in Russia by equating them. I think that's really damaging. Like, you know.
No. I'm not saying Russia isn't bad. Russia is bad,
worse,
and a lot
far worse.
But to say it's far worse lets the United States and their fascist tendencies off the hook. That's what I'm saying.
No, it doesn't. I can say both are bad. I'm just not going to lie by equating the two of them.
But to say that one's far, far worse makes it seem like...
That's true. That's a true statement, by the way. So if you disagree, like, you're advocating for lying to serve a political point. I think it's possible to say that Russia is far worse, but still to heavily condemn what America does. And I know that because I do it.
I mean, I'm not a fan of Russia. Russia is obviously imperialist and all that, but like at the same time, I feel that a lot of leftists, you know, we mentioned earlier, optics, like they'll go super duper hard when it comes to Russia, and like when it comes to the United States, they'll be like, you know, we're bad, but Russia's worse.
Russia is
Like,
worse, and right now Russia's doing the big bad thing. We're talking about Russia, yeah. So like the thing is, the thing is, like I'm only. I'm only arguing against the whataboutism, okay? When protests were happening in America and American protesters were getting arrested, I was not out here going, okay, well, what Russia does is worse, so it's okay that the police arrest our protesters. But the left is doing the opposite, where when Russia does anything bad, they're rushing up to the microphones to scream about how America does all these bad things too, and actually we're far worse. I'm not doing the whataboutism.
Because the U.S. State Department often tries to play the moral high warrior bullshit and try to act like Russia's this crazy, you know,
what State Department publication are you referring to exactly? Or are you referring kind of like broadly to like American hegemonic media?
Yes, yeah, I'm talking American hegemonic media.
Okay, so the State Department, just so you know, the State Department isn't the same thing as the media broadly. A lot of lefties conflate this as though the State Department literally just gives America its news, which if it did, I promise you, the news would not focus so much every single time Americans lost their lives in conflicts abroad. The State Department hates it when we pay attention to that. So, like, don't equate those things. Additionally, Russia is worse, and the State Department's job is to talk about countries other than the U.S. It's literally the Foreign Affairs Department. Why wouldn't they be talking about what Russia does?
Do you think the State Department is going to try to make those countries look in a good light or look in a bad light? Yes or no?
What do you? The State Department's job is to frame information in a way that benefits American hegemony. If they have to make things look good or bad, you know, there's an incentive to do either depending on the situation, but like, I don't care what their biases are. I care whether or not their biases are leading them to incorrect conclusions. Often they do, mind you. Though generally speaking, honest to God, the State Department doesn't do or say that much in a public advocacy kind of way, you know? When lefties complain about the State Department, they're usually talking about the powers that be in a very reductive way. The State Department's job isn't to be a propaganda agency. It's to regulate the interactions the United States officials have with other countries. And to that extent, you know, of course they have their biases, ones which serve the U.S. But if those biases are leading them to say stuff like Russia is worse than the U.S., they're correct. So I'm okay with that. Like, all right, your bias led you to the right answer that time, you know?
I mean, you want to talk about Putin arresting people and the Russian officials arresting people for protesting, but we're not going to act like, you know, I mean, obviously the Vietnam War was pretty unpopular in America, but we're not going to act like thousands and thousands upon thousands of
this is what I mean by the whataboutism. Why are you bringing up something that happened 60 years ago? What does that have to do with what's happening right now?
Whataboutism is critical because a lot of the time
it's a fallacy.
You said what?
It's a fallacy. Why would you be like, okay, well, what Russia is doing in 2022 is bad, but what America did in the 1960s was also bad? Like, yeah, okay. Did you wait? Hold on. When did I defend Nixon in this convo? Can you find the time that I did that? What hypocrisy?
I'm not saying you're defending Nixon. I didn't say you were defending Nixon.
Okay, tell me about a group you think is bad.
Anywhere in the world?
Yeah, anywhere in the world.
The CIA.
Okay, why the fuck aren't you also talking about Pol Pot? Don't you think it's a little bit hypocritical for you to bring up CIA when Pol Pot did really bad things? You know he killed everyone with glasses? Do you have any idea how many people died under his reign? The population of Cambodia dropped to like 2/3 of what it was before. Like this is stupid. What do you mean? Like Russia's doing something bad today? Let's talk about Vietnam? I don't get it. Why? To what point?
Because a lot of the times United States, especially Western leftists, they often will make crazy statements about other parts of the world without giving any sort of context. Like they'll get angry about certain global South movements, but not like a certain leader because, you know,
we're not talking about global South movements, though. We're talking about Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Like, I don't get, like, we're being so broad. Like, I have problems when people do things. Like, okay, I also have problems when things happen. Aren't we talking about Russia and Ukraine?
Yeah, but a lot of the times what I just said applies to not just with Russia and Ukraine. It applies with other movements across the world. Like, Western leftists will make it seem like, this government is super authoritarian, but not give any type of criticism to the United States government when they do the exact same shit. And in fact, they do it on a much larger scale worldwide.
You don't have to. So
Yeah.
this is the definition of whataboutism, okay? If your issue is that people don't point out when America does bad things, just say that. Stop taking issue with people pointing out bad things other countries do without then like also mentioning America for some kind of like LARPy virtue signal points. Like that's really weird.
Well,
like,
how is that LARPy virtue signal?
because because it's not related to the topic and you only want it brought up to placate this perceived unfairness in discourse given that has nothing to do with the actual topic at hand. If you want to address things like this, you could do this to any conversation anytime. Talking about one thing, well, why don't you talk more about another thing? The answer to that is, well, I don't fucking know. Then why don't we talk about that other thing when we talk about that other thing and talk about this thing now? But like I don't get the point. If your issue is criticism of like American hegemony, that's fine. I talk about that on my channel. But why does it have to be brought up when we're condemning Russia? You would never do this when like we're talking about Palestine and Hamas.
Because oftentimes Russia will do aggression simply, well, in this instance specifically, Russia's being aggressive because they don't want NATO. They don't want Ukraine
that's
to join
not
NATO.
the case. Putin has explicitly said it was blood and soil. He wants to restore the Russian Empire. You don't say stuff like that when you're concerned about. And also, even if it was NATO, who cares? Ukraine has the right to defend itself.
So, do you think Russia has the right to defend itself?
Yeah, against being invaded, not against their neighboring countries forming defensive pacts.
Okay, I can somewhat agree with that, but Vaush, your content is amazing. I fuck with it, no cap. But I gotta get ready to go. But it was nice talking to you.
Ain't nothing, man. I appreciate talking to you as well.
All right.
You be well, okay?
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.